One.
Weekend. Mm-mm.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wine Foundry in Napa, California. We're a family-owned winery focused in on crafting custom barrels for wine geeks across the globe from some of the most sought-after vineyards in Napa and Sonoma. If seeking to go from a wine drinker to a winemaker, all roads kind of come back to the Wine Foundry. I am Stuart Ake. This week, my colleague Patrick Sabo and I are excited to chat with Chris Hyde of Hyde Vineyards, located in Carneros. In addition to kind of exploring how Syrah expresses itself as a standalone wine, we'll explore its strengths as part of complex blends, and we look forward to gaining deeper understanding of Los Carneros. Fellas, I propose a toast. What are you guys drinking over there? Cheers.
Cheers.
Don't break any glasses.
What do you mean? It's good luck. Hey, thanks for having us, Stuart.
You got it, man.
Intro. We are, you can see the label right there, drinking a little bit of our Hyde Vineyard Estate Syrah. That's 2016 vintage. And this all comes from our vineyards right across the street from our estate winery. So very excited. This is the first vintage that we made of this wine. It's a single Syrah clone. We have a few different ones that we're growing. This is the original planting of Syrah from the original planting, which my father put in 1990. And we've done some more planting since then. We have about 16 acres. So it makes up about 8% of what we grow. We have 10 different varietals at Hyde Vineyard. We're farming about 200 acres. So Syrah is a grape that we planted a fair amount of in different areas, and I think is very suited to the region of Carneros.
Fantastic. Well, how do you guys want to start? Patrick, do you want to jump in and ask some questions? How do you want to make this go?
Yeah, I think that curious to see what his thoughts are on Carneros particularly. I'm in agreement. I love Syrah. Syrah is really, I think Chris will agree, you can grow it under a number of different conditions. But I actually prefer cooler or coastal Syrah over hotter and warmer area Syrah. So I think Carneros, with being the first spot that comes off the bay in the fog that comes through here, and the coolness and the mildness of the mornings and evenings, particularly in the afternoon winds, will lend itself for a really beautiful version of Syrah. And I guess that I'd like to ask Chris to see if he has particular thoughts on on how it kind of exhibits itself and displays compared to some other places that he's seen Syrah.
Yep.
How do you characterize Carneros in general as far as and Syrah, and as far as how things are done in this area?
So a little bit about the vineyard. Yeah, good question, Patrick. So we are located close to the San Pablo Bay. We're less than 40 miles from the bay, but we also have a unique geographical setting where we're at the bottom end of a mountain range. Of all the mountain ranges, the Sonoma Mountains, the Mayacamas. So we actually have a little more airflow coming in directly from the coast as well, which is one of the reasons why you get this offshore flow, heavy winds coming, not just southward from the bay, but also perhaps heavier impact from the coast itself. And that's why Carneros has been ideal for cooler climate varieties, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, obviously some great sparkling wines made here. Carneros, a very diverse region. Generally about 10, 15 degrees cooler than up Valley Napa. But also we have, the soils are a big part of what makes Hyde Vineyard special, what makes our sites that we farm so special. We have about 14 to 18 inches of very shallow clay loam soils, sandy, loamy, kind of a hard clay pan right underneath that. So you end up with wines that have great amounts of acidity, low pH, higher acid wines, give you great ageability, great texture, a very interesting flavor profile. And I think, again, your note on coastal vineyards being excellent for Syrah is 100%. You end up with wines that can have that acid side to them, but also enough warmth that they can achieve ripeness and get that full bodied, so you get the best of both worlds.
So I'm going to bring up a map of Carneros here to kind of point out where the property is. So, so this is the bay, right? So this is San Pablo Bay, which for those of you who don't know, it's just kind of a part of San Francisco Bay. And if I zoom in here, well, actually, welcome to the Wine Foundry. It says work, but it is play, I assure you. And then if you're heading towards Sonoma, you'd be just, you're just 9 minutes from the winery, but you can see that marine influence because we're so close to the bay. As the crow flies, you know, it's just over a mile to the San Francisco Bay. And for those who've never been out, starting around this time of year, we get this crazy push-pull of fog because inland it's super hot. So that hot air rises, it draws the fog in from the coast and it blankets. And then at midday, that fog burns off and then it pushes back in. So you get this amazing dynamic push and pull. Hey, Chris, we've got a question from somebody in our audience. I'm gonna, this is Phil Gurin from Left Coast Wines. I'm gonna see if I can bring him in here. Phil, can't quite get you on screen for some reason. Phil, can you chime in with your question? We can't pull up your video. Can you ask your question?
I gotta open here. The host has stopped my video, but you've given me my audio. I'll take it.
Okay, sorry about that. I tried to promote you, but if you could also pantomime at the same time, that would be fantastic.
I am, and you're unable to see it, which is your problem. But I'm sitting here clicking. It says I can't start my video. No worries.
Oh,
hi guys. It's a shame I can't be seen, but that's okay. I cleaned up. I showered for the occasion. Because I have I love Syrah. And I have made some Syrah with our friends here at the Wine Foundry. Patrick has, you know, taken me down dark and strange paths over the years. We've made pure varietals. This year we made we were fortunate enough, in 2018 we made a GSM with some Syrah from Russian River Valley. I was curious, I'm mostly familiar with wines further south in the Central Coast, you know, Paso wines. Can you maybe talk a little about, you know, Sonoma, Carneros, Central Coast, Paso, Whitehawk, all those kinds of places? What's the difference? What might I be tasting, experiencing? If you can compare, anything you can share about those things.
The Civil War between Northern California and Southern California.
He lives down in LA.
Okay.
He's a terrible human being too. No.
Phil, thanks so much for the question.
Thanks for
Great
the question.
I'm here.
Yeah. I'll give my 2 cents on it. You know, it really depends. I'm very political, of course. So it really depends. You know, for example, we're tasting this Syrah. You can make Syrahs. So in general, I'd say cooler climate Syrah tends to be not as ripe, overtly ripe on the palate. But it really depends on how you pick it. You know, Chris his wines show I'd say restraint, and so you could make the wines he's looking for. He likes wines like I do as well. I think it's the B word, you know, the balance that is very subjective. And so if you're looking for, so if you can make a Carnero Syrah or a cooler climate Syrah to be, you know, extra ripe, but that's generally not what people do. They're usually trying to maintain the acidity and the brightness of it. You know, the Syrah can be planted pretty far inland, or as I said, you know, we worked with the Syrah from down south, the Whitehawk. That's probably only 5-6 miles from the coast also. So it shows coastal influence and sandy soils, but I'd say that it's a touch heavier, and that, you know, just comparing Whitehawk, for example, than fruit up here, I said the Whitehawk is probably a little bit more meaty and robust in general. These wines are generally further, a little bit higher acid, slightly lower pH, redder fruit profile. And so it's difficult to stereotype them, but I'd say that if I had to say one was the right answer or not, but in general, cooler climate is the way to go. I said as I mentioned, we're maybe 30, 40 miles from the coast, but we're coastal in influence. So it's not like it is it would be if you were in another area, perhaps that far away, you might be 30, 40 degrees warmer.
Would you make them differently? Would you let them sit in barrel differently? Would you do different things?
I think that general, so we're tasting, there's your video.
We got you on video.
Hello, sir. So Chris, we're tasting his 16 Syrah. And as I said, I think you'd be a big fan of it because it shows what I consider to be, some restraint in that he's not overdoing it with new oak. He's not trying to be over the top with the rightness or the tannin level on the wine. So the wine feels very balanced. You could have another example, though, maybe his next door neighbor or down the street, perhaps, that doesn't see the wines the same way. The winemaker would have a big more impact. And so I think in general, if you have winemakers that show restraint, then the fruit all things being equal, that the fruit will show prettier on cooler climate. I said, I don't think it, but I also, again, I don't want to overdo the tannins or the extraction or the oak on it because it doesn't need it. It's already so pretty that why would I cover it up with things that don't need to be there? But it's hard to stereotype an area because you might go next door. I'm not, no offense to the neighbor, or down the street and get a wine that was grown under similar conditions that is totally different. You're like, I don't understand. And so I think depends on the winemaker somewhat, but he's making the wines similar the way that I would do them as well. And they show, as I said, I think balance is the
balance. I don't want to hog anything, but I can just get Chris another question. Do you prefer with your Syrah to try to make it as close to a single varietal, or do you like to blend it?
So what we're doing here is all single varietal. I've been open to blending selections within that single varietal, but I feel that as our wine project here is directly connected to the vineyard, it's kind of an educational experience. So we've at this point kept everything single varietal, but that's not been overruled with other wine projects, obviously.
Hey, Phil, thanks for checking in. And like magic, I am going to make you disappear, but we still care about you deeply. All right, take it easy. Thank you.
See you, Phil.
Thanks.
Hey, we've got a question that came in via telephone, but they want to remain anonymous. Hey, Chris and Patrick, so we're talking about Carneros. What are some of the challenges that you think are associated with Carneros? Like, look, you said it's cooler. So what are some of the most difficult things that we talk about here?
Farming particularly. Yeah.
Farming. Yeah. Yep, exactly. And I'm going to dive into the farming here. We farm with our own crews. I have full-time vineyard crews that have been some of whom have been working our vineyard for over 30 years. It's all about timing. It's all about attention to detail and getting things done on time. Because if you show up a week or 2 or 3 days late, you can end up with mildew issues. You mentioned earlier, it's cool, it's foggy. We get the fog bank that lays in late into the morning, a lot of days. And yes, you do get the breezes in the afternoon, the winds, but you still have a lot of cool weather in the day, which gives you that slow ripening, which makes it easy to maintain acidity and have early season varietals ripen in the correct amount of time. But you got to make sure to get the canopies opened up, which means having the right amount of labor, making things get done right. Sometimes you lean a little bit on mechanical. We have a diverse number of clients. We have a diverse number of varieties that we grow, which allows us to sort of time it, but it's this delicate balance, this dance, to get all the work in the vineyard done in a timely fashion. And every year you're dealing with a different situation. Is it hot? Is it cool? for a longer period of time? Do you have the additional time? Is it going to rain in late May or early June? You know, these are all factors, and you need to have the tools, and you need to be vigilant, and you need to make sure and take care of problematic areas. And it's all about staying on top of it, staying alert, and keeping your farming on point. So
as far as a
Sorry about
as
that.
far as a, yeah, as far as a would you say, I mean, obviously logistics, just like at the winery, logistics are critical, right? So that, you know, it's not very sexy to mention
absolutely.
logistics on the back.
A lot of
But
what
as,
we do. Yeah.
but as far as the farming, you know, I guess on a microbe level, is mildew the #1 problem?
It is right now. That's why it's on my mind. Yeah, and later in the season, about a month and a half from now, we're going to be worried about, in a typical year, we'll be worried about, you know, the bunches. You want to avoid clusters tangling up when you have veraison coming and the acid turns to sugar and you start to have color in the berries.
You want bunches?
You're worried about, you're about late season bunch rot, botrytis becomes the issue. So right now it's about opening up the canopy, getting good airflow, getting sunlight on the canopy, and you know, we've made experiments. You can see the row directions here are kind of northeast by southwest. That's all about capturing the prevailing winds. That's all about getting the right amount of sunlight on your clusters and maintaining good airflow within the canopies. These are all details that my dad's kind of hammered out over his 40 years of farming. Later in the season, it's about making sure that your clusters are well spaced, that they get also sunlight, but that you don't have berries growing into each other and causing situations where you can have bunch rot, which can quickly escalate into a huge loss of fruit. So yeah, there's a couple of major points in the season, and right now we're dealing with mildew, later on bunch rot, and yeah, these things can spread really quickly, particularly under the cool climate conditions that we're under. So you have to really be a precision farmer in order to handle all the different varieties that we have, and also farming to the specifications of the various clients that we work with here.
So, hey, Chris, this question comes from Stuart Ake of the Wine Foundry in Napa, California. Hey, actually, I mean, on the property, sorry, I'm actually curious about this because the property is like so close to the bay that you actually get some protection, you know, by mitigating from the, you know, the extremes aren't maybe as extreme as, you know, other parts. But you have a wind machine on the property. So do you guys, is frost a challenge there in March, April?
Yep, absolutely, Stuart. Actually, this year in particular was a big frost year. Yes, Misha. So actually, I have 10 wind machines. We have one here on the property. We've got a bunch of other ones, and they're all strategically located in low lying spots. Yep. Because, you know, obviously hot air rising, you get these cold pockets. And this year, there was about a 2-week stint where I was turning on the wind machines every morning. I'd get up around 2 or 3 in the morning, and it takes me about an hour and a half to run around all the different properties and fire up the wind machines, whether they're gas or diesel or propane, and get them running. And honestly, the wind machines only protect you in a narrow window of cold air conditions. And we're fortunate to have things not get too cold here. But this year in particular, it got so cold that even running the wind machines we had, there were areas that had a slight amount of damage. I'd say for the most part, it was under 5%. So yeah, that's definitely something to take into consideration. And I remember in 2008, we had 21 days of frost. So, you know, this year was a little less than that, but it did cause some damage. We did have some buds that burnt and came back. And when they do come back, it puts you a week or two behind on the fruit from those vines. So it's something to take into consideration. It's not a huge problem. We're not all out there burning candles and straw bales like in Burgundy, but it is something that, yeah, if not kept in check, and if you don't run those machines, you end up losing. You can lose a whole crop.
Well, 2008 was a perfect example. A lot of people got hit. And the reason what we're talking about, or kind of, it was kind of raised by Chris a little bit, is that, as you know, Chris said hot air rises. Conversely, cold air flows like water. So he was talking about sections of vineyards that are lower in elevation. The cold air can pool there, and then you can be really susceptible to frost damage. And then you're just trying to keep the air flowing until, until you can start getting warmer temps. Just keep it going for a little bit. Hey, we've got another question that came in on the Q&A, but it also from an anonymous person. And they want to know kind of about, look, we're all trying to be good stewards of the earth. We can take this from a viticulture side of things or a winemaking side. Sustainability practices in terms of lower intervention approaches to farming and winemaking. Both of you guys want to jump on it. And I'm just going to get closer to the screen as I pulled my headset out.
So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing here at Hyde Vineyards. My father's always been a huge proponent of sustainability, organic farming practices, and it's been a passion of mine also. I went to Cal Poly, studied farming, viticulture, agriculture, and it's something I've pursued and continued to progress with all of our farming here in Carneros. And it all starts with the soil. That's the most important part. So obviously no herbicides used here. We're 100% mechanized or by hand when it comes to weed removal. It's been a point of ours, and it's a point of pride. And we also plant cover crops, native seeds. So you get to a point where the things that grow in the vineyard, and Carneros is known for having every type of weed known to man. We've gotten to a point where we've planted species that are low growing, friendly, flowers that hopefully promote beneficial insects. Obviously, biodiversity is very important. We have a situation that, is a monoculture in some regards. So we have a lot of olive trees growing. My dad was known to plant apple trees out in the middle of the vineyard, pears, plum trees. So we've got kind of an orchard situation going on at the same time. It's important to have grasses and other things growing that so that the only thing to eat isn't your grapevines. So we do alternating cover crops between our vines in order to be able to do some tillage to help with our shallow soils so that the vines don't just die in drought years. But we alternate those and we plant healthy species, and so that's where it all starts. All of our sprays, we're using dusting sulfur, stolid oil predominantly. So we try to be, again, staying on top of it, like I was mentioning earlier with the work in the vineyard. Spraying is the same way. Tightening up the intervals, using sustainable products, which frequently are cheaper than others. That's always been a focal point for us in the vineyard. So.
Yeah, I totally applaud those efforts, particularly the no herbicide aspect of it. It's very difficult for farmers to and costly to do things manually, and much cheaper for the most part to use Roundup. And so Roundup's the worst thing for the soil and the people probably spraying it too, and I just think that, but unfortunately for many, especially mom and pop places, that it's just cost prohibitive. And so it's excellent. And I think a luxury spot to be in, to be able to get to the point where you farm enough and or big enough to where you can kind of afford to do it, if you will. And it's so important particularly for the farm workers, I think to be as sustainable as possible. I think it's the right thing for the earth as well, and for the wine, and the wines benefit. It's a win-win-win situation, and I applaud those efforts. And I was super happy to hear how sustainable and how much important it was to you, as it is to us as well. We do things minimally in the winery as well. I want intentionally to try to avoid any type of synthetic, means, I guess. And so it's really nice to hear how important it is to the farmers, particularly because they're the ones that are feeding us, and so I
Yeah.
applaud you and your father for having I think the right mindset. It's critical for all the people that you're impacting, particularly your workers, but also yourselves and us as well, the enjoyers downstream.
Yep.
And so I think it's as I said, it shows when you go to their vineyards, it's gorgeous, and you don't need to see barren strips down the row with Roundup spray to see what a vineyard looks like, and that is not a sign of quality, in my opinion. If anything, it's the opposite. And so I understand it for some situations, but I like it, and I super appreciate your efforts in that regard for hundreds of acres that won't be this year and last year and next year won't be used on. So I cheers to you guys.
Cheers to that.
And salute. And,
Yeah, so the handoff from vineyard to winemaker, same philosophy, and there's been a real shift in that direction because everyone lives amongst these vines, and this is our, we want to be whatever Mr. Rogers said. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Look, I don't know what he said, but we want to be we want to be good neighbors. Hey, we're going to shift gears into the winemaking side of the equation a little bit. And Chris, since you do this as well, look, Patrick, we've worked with Syrah from Santa Barbara. We down at White Hawk. We've worked with Syrah, the Sonoma Coast, Russian River. So Mendocino. How do we work? How are you going to treat this unique, considering the unique environs in which it's grown?
I think that, as I said,
As you put on the sunglasses.
You know what? I just got in the sun. I just got into the sun. So it is. It's warm out here. It's a nice warm.
It is
afternoon,
very toasty.
but it's toasty in the sun for sure. And so, I think that we will do similar type methods to what we've done. I said I think that moreover, you'll see slight variations in the wine, mostly to do with the grape source and the clone. We're going to be working the fruit we're getting is the Alban clone, which has been made very popular and by some famous producers down south as well, and up here as well. It's a well-known clone of Syrah that has shown really well under multiple conditions. Just like most varieties, Syrah has a number of clones, and they all are slightly different versions of the. And so depending on who you ask, one might be more preferential to the others. But I in general, as you know, Stu, we have been fairly minimal. The question is, should we do any stems or anything else in it? So that's the question. Have you done any skin or stem contact with what you didn't? Did you do any in this or not?
I'd say no, but we have under other projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So with our winemaking over at HTV, where we use several different clones, we've done stem inclusion in a lot of years. So I've seen good results to it. I'd say, putting on my winemaking hat, it's more vintage dependent. Depends on what your clusters look like. Do you have a good fruit set? What's your stem to berry ratio? That's probably a factor that's involved. But it can definitely give you a little more tannin structure to your wines.
I'm not picking up any skin inclusion or stem inclusion in this wine.
Yep, this wine was made more in the Pinot Noir style.
Yeah, I say because this wine shows very, as I mentioned, I like the word restrained or restraint in general, as far as because I think that it means, to me at least, that the wine it wasn't trying too hard to be something perhaps that it's not, and so some people want, a lot of wine to be meaty or chewy or heavy, This wine shows to me more, again, more pretty than that. And so I think that probably it'll be a similar type result to what we're going to be doing as well with the fruit. But again, that's, we have to judge the rest of the vintage as we get it here and see how the rest of the year unfolds. But it's been a moderately, it was definitely a later. So in general, how is this compared to, you think, to bud break this year compared to average for you?
Bud break this year was more reminiscent of what you see in a drought year. So the last couple of years, bud break was in March. This year was really earlier in February because we had such warm weather. So on the earlier side, but then we had some cool weather later on, which kind of caught us up a little bit. So you have to kind of put the whole vintage in perspective, so to speak. But here we are in June, and everything is set, and I've seen things later. So I guess still on the earlier side.
Hey, thank you for that. Hey, we have kind of a question that came in. We'll table this briefly, and then we'll kind of bring it back a little bit there. Sorry, in a little bit. So we'll raise that question in just a short. Hey, look, Syrah, I'm going to say, look, like Cabernet is like the Rolling Stones, right? Pinot Noir is like the Beatles. And then you've got Syrah is kind of like the Kinks, because like everyone says it's Lola, or You Really Got Me, or All Day, All Night. But the Kinks had this amazing period in the late 60s, early 70s. But since they were banned from the United States at that point, nobody really heard him here. Why, you guys have helped pioneer this grape. It was, in 2000 we had 12,000 acres planted. 2010, it went up to 19,000 plus. And then there was kind of a fallout for a few years. Now we're back up to 16,000 plus. So we're seeing it. Why is this grape still misunderstood?
So you have 1/1000th of the, you said you had 16 acres? You have 1/1000th of the...
16 out of 200, so 8%. Yeah.
16 out of 16,000. So you have 1/1000th of the Syrah.
This is leading the Syrah revolution. So why is this grape still misunderstood? Is it misunderstood? Is this just me kind of reading into it?
Interesting. Can we talk about Merlot?
We could talk about Merlot. No, but it's like a lot of people, like our clients are obsessed with blends. Look, blends are everything. And so you guys do a standalone blend. Where are we going with this? Yeah.
So it's the same type of idea, right? There was Syrah, Mourvedre, Grenache, GSMs, just like Merlot, being blended with, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cab Franc, and then had a little stint as a standalone varietal. And then, there's that popular joke that, well, maybe I won't mention that joke.
No. We're not. We maybe that one could be for after the video is not on. Yeah,
that's a great joke. But I know the joke.
Anyway, yeah, and I think the same way that other varietals have come under fire, it's because people jumped on the craze and planted it, and there was a lot of inferior plantings and people throwing wine out there that wasn't of the best quality and basically giving a bad name to it, where those who really understood the grape, it always held a higher regard to them. But it's something about being able to teach people about it and spreading the good word and who think about it right now. And I want answers from the crowd who's watching. Who is it that's making good Syrah out here in California? What are the best Syrahs? Come up with the top 5. Maybe not easy to do for a lot of viewers out there. So who's actually doing a good job of it? I guess the answer to your question is there's a lot of bad Syrah out there, and sometimes that's what it takes, a rough time in the market to cull out the bad ones so that the good ones can rise up. And there's a lot of good Syrahs.
There's also a stylistic thing because the grape is so malleable. It can grow and ripen in warm regions, and you get this candied Shiraz quality about it or whatever, kind of like the Australian style. You also get the beautiful Carnero stuff where you get, you start getting some black olive and stuff like this. I love, do you guys have a visitor?
His beautiful dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanna come over?
So I just love the fact, I think maybe it's because the grape can do so many things. Get a glass for that pup, and cheers.
Here's the Misha.
Live internet. So yeah, and I love the grape, and I love it as a standalone. And look, it's great that people look. We know in Châteauneuf in southern France, look, they're mixing grapes all the time. It's been part of the history for 2,000 years. But I want that grape, and it's good to see it coming back with some people. So a little market correction is on its way up again.
Yeah, I totally agree with Chris too. I think unfortunately some poor fruit and some poor producers have kind of ruined the name a little bit for, just like with Merlot as well. Unfortunately, Merlot can make some of the some killer wines, but it could also make very mediocre wines as well. And I think Syrah does that as well. I think for winemakers, particularly from over here, including myself too, it takes a while. It took me a while, I think, to kind of really understand it. If there were more wines out there, Cab, there's a gazillion examples of it. Pinot too, there's still quite a bit. I think Syrah is more difficult for people, even someone that's been someone that's been doing it for a while. It's still a little bit more difficult to describe, or a little bit more difficult to stereotype, I think. And so I think it only comes with more experience and understanding. And really, I'm saying drink more Syrah. That's probably what I'm saying. So I think you need to go out and buy. I think the French term is well, I'll let your imagination go with the French term. But
Wow, thank you, Patrick.
I was going to use a little French on you, but I don't think you speak French, so I'll just kind of keep it on the.
Le cheval nage. The horse swims. Very useful. Very useful when you're in Bonn. Hey, so Chris, let's go back to the brand a little bit. So you have, the Hyde Vineyard. You have your estate wines, and then HDV. We haven't really talked about that. How do you guys have, like, it's a three-headed beast. You have all these different pieces. Can you kind of talk about the family's other projects?
Sure. So my father planted the original vineyards back in 1978. He started developing Hyde Vineyards. My father had worked at a lot of different wineries. Family farming goes back 5 or 6 generations on my father's side, and we've been involved with my dad's side of the family's been here a very long time. He grew up farming peaches, alfalfa, cattle. My grandfather was a dairy farmer, so my dad had an extensive farming background. He got into the farming game in the very early 70s, and when I grew up, we still had diversified farming portfolio. So although I grew up on the wine grape farm here at Hyde Vineyards in Napa, and my dad's cousin, Pamela de Villaine, actually was married to Aubert de Villaine, became the co-director of Domaine de la Romanée-Conti some years later. So my dad and Pam, their parents were very close friends. His mother and her mother were sisters. And my dad started getting into the wine business in the 70s, which is around the time where Aubert had kind of explored California winemaking and met his wife and gone back to work for the family business. So as my dad was planting and developing Hyde Vineyards, Aubert sort of was taking interest in what was going on. he started and planted his own vineyard and winery in Rhône, which is in Burgundy as well, growing Pinot Noir and Aligoté. And while the first vines were going up the stake, my dad went over to Burgundy to do a couple of harvests over there in 1980 and 81, where he met my mother, who's from Poland originally. And that's the inspiration for the design of our estate winery here as a Polish manor house. But anyway, my father was working harvest in France. My mother, being from Europe, they met there, fell in love, and the rest is history. They got married. My mom moved back. My brother and I were born a couple of years later. Aubert continued to come and check in, and he was, a huge fan of California. He worked at Chalone, I think, back in the old days. So he was, a believer in California Chardonnays, and he kind of saw what was going on. My dad had been making homemade wines for years and years, and I think the two of them came together in around 1999 with the idea of, Aubert wanted to come and start a partnership and make some wines together. So they started off with Chardonnay and a red blend, a red table wine, which I think included Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Syrah, of all things. And that's what started a blend called the Belle Cousine, which is named after a beautiful cousin after my dad's cousin Pamela, my aunt. So that was the start of a family partnership, which is now in its 20th year or 21st year, HDV. And we're doing about 5,000 cases. We've been making wine for all these years. My dad and Aubert are still very active. We all get together 2 or 3 times a year at the winery, which is located on Trancas Street here in Napa, North Napa. And we make some excellent Chardonnays. It's a Chardonnay house. We make a small amount of Syrah now as well. And it's from 3 different clones, Shiraz, Noir, and Alban. And also one of the flagship wines is the Belle Cousine, which is still to this day a Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot blend. And then, so that was kind of our start off, and I've learned a great deal being a part of that with my dad. We started a small Pinot project at the Larry Hyde and Son Vineyards here in Carneros, which is, like I said, we farm 5 different sites. These are the newer vineyards that we have across the highway, and that's where we ended up building our winery to house our Pinot Noir production. So the Larry Hyde wines that we make, the Syrah we're drinking today, these are based on our original Pinot Noir project. And what we're doing here is more of a DTC, more of a come visit the vineyard focused project, where HDV is more by allocation and international distribution, more of a European style business model. So the Hyde enterprise continues to grow. We just added a new vineyard to the portfolio this year. So we're
Today.
Today.
So very much a family business. It's all in the family. We all work together, and what we're doing here is about a little under 2,000 cases. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great journey, and my dad's been a great mentor to me through the whole thing.
Well, he's a legend, right? He's been doing it for a little while, and really kind of helped put this region on the map in modern winemaking. A couple of things. Chris used some language I just want to clarify. So first, you said right across the highway. So for those of you who do not live in the in this area, highway has maybe a slightly different connotation here, because when you go across that road, I mean, you can just walk across that road, right? And it is not like 6 lanes. Or you could drive a tractor. Exactly. Yeah. So it is not a toll. It is not a toll road. And then the other thing is he used an expression called DTC, direct to consumer. So it's like when you place the order on the internet to buy those bottles, that is direct to consumer. as opposed to kind of or going to the tasting room and buying it, as opposed to seeing it in a wine shop or a supermarket, that kind of stuff. That is multi-tier purchasing. So kind of touching the hem of the garment, kind of connecting directly with the winemaker. He also mentioned an area called Chalone, or a winery called Chalone. If you haven't been down to the Chalone AVA, you would head south of San Francisco on 101, on Highway 101. That is a highway. And then you make a left and you climb these crazy rock formations, sandstone, which the wind kind of, and the rain kind of carve out these ghostly characters. And in the 70s, since there was no water up there, people were kind of doing bucket brigades, bringing water up there to keep those vines happening. And so it is not a built-up area in terms of tasting, and I don't know if it ever will be, but that's the beauty of it. But great interpretations of Syrah, Pinot, and Chard, even though it's inland. It's a really, really fascinating spot. Hey, we just got, you know, somebody chimed in, Monty from San Francisco. He chimed in, he's like, that Rhone varietals are so much more complex. You've got all these different characters. So he trumpets them over Bordeaux varietals. And Monty's a big food guy, and he's like, man, there's so many layers on here that you can really dig into. And so it's just nice that people kind of understand. I think maybe the grapes are so complex, it can be hard. And then David chimed in. He's like, you know, if you grow it in a warm region, it's going to bring these characters. You grow it in a cool region. And then even within the Rhone itself, Northern Rhone, you've got Côte Rôtie. Then you go down south and you've got the blends, right? So, so fascinating stuff. Hey, Chris, thanks, man. Thank you for carving out time. If you want to learn more about Hyde Vineyards, you can check out Hyde Wines, HYDE Wines, and then you'll find out about that. And then the HDV, if you just kind of start typing in HDV wines, that website's going to pull up, and so you can kind of see the breadth of the different things that the family's doing. And then if you do some research, you're going to realize there's a reason we're so excited. I've wanted to work with this fruit for years, and so I am just very, very excited to have an opportunity to kind of jump in this year. And then Arvind asks, so Chris, really quick before we kind of sign off, hey, so you have 2 different tasting rooms, correct? And then COVID, are you guys doing appointments right now, or what's happening right now, and then plan for afterward?
Yep. So yeah, we have a tasting room here at the Hyde Estate, right off Sonoma Highway. And then, of course, we have a tasting room at HDV as well, both by appointment, both accepting tastings, following CDC guidelines, bring the mask with you, depending on weather, likely indoors. Guests, once seated, don't have to worry about the masks. The staff will be, following all guidelines, and we are allowing groups. We're welcoming groups by appointment. We've never been hosting more than 1 group at a time until this point, so nothing's really changed. Very private setting, guided tasting through all the different wines produced in Hyde Vineyards. So.
Fantastic. You can see how crazy it is right there. There's so much traffic. It can be really difficult.
It's a sweet spot. No, you should come. You should come for sure.
Hey, before we sign off, hey, Chris, I really want to thank you. Next week, we're really excited. The pride of Sonoma County we're going to be doing our for Inquisitive Sips for our Anarchist wine brand. We're joining up with Cowgirl Creamery, and Cowgirl, just amazing award-winning cheeses. And so we'll be pairing cheeses with wines. Chris is drooling over there. Patrick is speechless. And I will be wearing my Cowgirl Creamery shirt because I'm a little fanboy with that one. And then next Thursday, we have our book group, and Beyond Flavor by MW Nick Jackson. And it's basically his systematic approach to tasting. And look, he is a master of wine. There's what, a couple hundred in the world. And really interestingly, he would just break down wines by aroma and flavor, and he still got his master of wine. He kind of discovered how winemakers do it through acid and tannins, and he's had this epiphany. The book itself is literally, I mean, the book in total is 150 pages. You could knock it out tonight. Would love you to be on here. We loved a little mention in Forbes about our book group. But as I say, microeconomics, when you got 20 people doing a book group and Forbes is covering it, that's a small part of the economy. It's fantastic. And then we'll be back in a couple of weeks to explore Fruit Set, the next stage of our growing cycle for Wine Foundry Wednesday. We're really, really excited. Hey, everyone's welcome to drop off. If you've been embarrassed and you would like to ask questions, we encourage you to do so. We'll stay on for a few minutes. Chris, thank you, brother.
Cheers. Thank you.
You got it, man. You got it.
Cheers, guys.